Hello, this is Debra Cohen, a story and a song podcast that broadcasts every Sunday morning at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time on my YouTube channel. The handle is at Jewish Rock Music. And I wanted to share with you today a chapter from my new book, Sex, Drugs, and Rock and Roll. Specifically talking about a child. I'm talking about myself in this book as a help to those who notice their child is wired a little bit differently. Well, I was born in the 50s when there was no medical term or psychological term for somebody like me who's wired differently. So as a result, I was and continue to be misunderstood because I don't think like a lot of people do. And it gets me in trouble. What do I mean? Like, for example, let me just tell you, this really happened. True story. In the second grade, Mrs. Dolan, my elementary school teacher, paired us off with another reader in the class to critique a book about Jane, Spot, and I forget the name of the book. Spot. It was a popular series in the 50s. So the teacher was giving the instructions, and I asked a question, just a question, simple question, I thought. And the teacher's response was like so negative. She said, "Oh, you think differently. You would make a good devil's advocate." Now, imagine saying that to a second grade child who doesn't know what an advocate is, and only in my child mind heard her calling me the devil. And what happens when people sting me like that is I put it in my mind and blank it out. And that's what I've done all of my life. When people say things that are very hurtful, and even if the teacher didn't mean it to be hurtful, which a devil's advocate plays the opposite role, but how was I to know as a second grader that that's what she was saying to me? But actually, she, not knowing what a neurodivergent child is, was, I guess, giving me a back-asswards compliment, but I, as a child, didn't know why she was saying that. I just thought she was calling me the devil. I never told my mother. I just kept it to myself. Well, maybe you have a child that thinks outside the box. And now, in the year 2026, the psychology world has a name for this kind of child. It's called neurodivergent. So I would like to share this chapter of my memoir with you, which came out January 9th, 2026, to maybe help you understand those people that don't think like you, and they're not trying to be instigators. They're not trying to be troublemakers. They're just simply asking questions which always seem to get them in trouble. If that interests you, or you want to know more about my memoir, stay tuned for the next 30-ish minutes, and I will be right back after this message. And again, this is Debra Cohen, and I'm sharing a chapter from my book today to help those who want to know what a neurodivergent child is, or even in my case, an adult, so that you can understand just because they think differently, it doesn't mean they're going against you. It's just that they don't think like you do, and there's nothing wrong with that. All right, so let's learn about this term because wasn't it wasn't announced in the 60s when I was struggling with this brain wiring, and it is now. So let's dig in and find out more about a neurodivergent personality. The term neurodivergent describes brains that function differently from what society considers typical or neurotypical. It includes a wide spectrum of differences such as ADHD, autism, dyslexia, dyspraxia, sensory processing disorder, and more subtle cognitive variations that can affect how a person processes emotion, sound, focus, and connection. And again, I'm sharing this. This is from page 80 of my new book, my first memoir. I'm calling it Series 1, Sects, Sects, meaning the exploration of trying to find meaning in my life. Born into a Catholic family, renounced Catholicism in the 8th grade and went on a quest to find meaning in my life. Who am I? Why was I born? Why don't I fit in this family? Why am I different? As if these are things that are negative. Being neurodivergent is not a defect. It's a difference. But for those of us who grew up before there was language for it, we often internalized our differences as flaws. We were called sensitive, dramatic, impulsive, or too intense. We were taught to mask, to fit in, to quiet our instincts, to hide the noise in our minds. And I'm speaking from experience. I, Debra Cohen, was called too sensitive, a drama queen, and told more than once to take a chill pill. Does that sound like something that somebody's told you? All of these comments exacerbated my uniqueness in a very negative way because I was often misunderstood. As a side note, my theme song in my own mind was a song that was recorded by the Animals in the 60s called, Oh Lord, please don't let me be misunderstood. I've thought that and continue to think that all my life. I've always felt like a round peg trying to be forced into a square hole and continue to feel that way. In defense, I would say to them that they were trying to put a round peg in a square hole. I felt like I was being bullied for being different, and oftentimes I was mocked. Even in high school, when the snooty librarian gave me some disapproving looks for wearing black nail polish and a leopard skirt that I had proudly sewn and worn to school, I began to get a chip on my shoulder by this time in my life. I was ahead of my time in the goth world of fashion, and some stuffy biddies wanted me to conform to the likes of them. And I'm going to skip ahead through some of this because I don't want to give away the book. So let's continue on page 82. And we're talking about neurodivergent personalities, if you're just joining me. People that are wired differently and misunderstood because of it. Many neurodivergent individuals experience relationships that burn brightly at first, passionate, idealized, full of promise. We feel love in surround sound. But emotional regulation, communication mismatches, and sensory sensitivities can create invisible rifts. For example, I heard criticism where he intended detachment, meaning my former husband. I sought reassurance when he valued independence. I expressed love through intensity. He expressed it through provision. Have any of you women ever heard, "Of course I love you. I'm paying the bills. You should know that." Really? Just because you're paying the bills means you love me? I need more than that. Our systems, in this case, clashed, not because either of us was cruel, but because we were incompatible in processing. He wanted order. I needed empathy. He loved logic. I lived in feeling. We're talking about a husband and wife here that are trying to communicate. When two nervous systems are differently wired, one overstimulated and the other avoidant, the relationship can feel like static on a radio. Through therapy, I learned to view my neurodivergence not as a curse, but as a compass. My heightened empathy and perception were not weaknesses. They were superpowers I had never learned to regulate. Counseling taught me to pause before reacting, breathing through overwhelm, taking a breath in instead of becoming defensive is something I still have to work on. To communicate my needs clearly instead of masking them or expecting others to know what I need. To recognize overstimulation and give myself sensory breaks. To seek partners who appreciate emotional honesty rather than fear it. There are many tools and therapies that help neurodivergent adults, from CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, to DBT, dialectical behavior therapy, somatic movements like Tai Chi and yoga, and community support groups that teach emotional literacy and nervous system regulation. Most importantly, I learned that self-understanding is the first act of love. The body remembers what the mind forgets. Healing did not come from the mind alone. It came from the body, from learning to move with intention, to slow my breath, and to listen again to what my nervous system had been whispering all along. My counselor once said, "The body keeps the score." At the time, I didn't understand what she meant, but later, when I took an anatomy class, it began to make sense to me. I looked for healing modalities that resonated with me and found yoga and Tai Chi to calm my frayed nerves. Each slow movement, each breath in motion, was like rewiring old circuits that had once been tangled in fear and self-doubt. The gentle flow of Tai Chi taught me something profound. Calm is not the absence of feeling, it's the balance of it. Another healing experience for me was getting therapeutic massages. I learned healthy touch and the absolute necessity for human beings to receive love through skilled therapist hands. I began to regulate my emotions more naturally. My thoughts quieted, my senses softened, even my relationships changed. For the first time, I could feel my emotions without drowning in them. I began to trust myself again, to find rhythm in stillness, in power, in gentleness. Somewhere it is said that we need 3 hugs a day for emotional balance. I believe this and came to the realization that something wasn't quite right with me the first day I met my mother-in-law, Beth. My husband, or I should say my former husband, Michael, and I drove to Bloomfield Hills shortly after we got engaged to meet his parents for the first time. I knew that it was going to be important to win them over, especially since Michael told me that they were very disappointed that he wasn't marrying a nice Greek girl. They apparently offered to pay Michael a year of support if he would live in Greece to find a wife in Greece, to find a Greek wife, because I wasn't Greek. I foiled their desires. I was a Finnish ex-Catholic. I'll never forget the day we pulled into their expansive yard to view their palatial gated home. I saw Beth standing at the top of the steps going into their kitchen as we entered their garage. She was all smiles, well groomed, perfect to the T. We got out of our truck and Michael introduced me to this lovely lady who was soon to be my mother-in-law, and she opened her arms to greet me with a hug. With a hug. I remember standing there as I walked slowly toward her to receive her warm embrace. My arms went limp and dangled at my side, lifeless. I had never been hugged, and I didn't know how to respond at that moment. Can you imagine an adult standing there with my arms at my sides while my mother-in-law is reaching out to me to embrace me with her greeting? It wasn't natural for me to give her a hug back. I was caught up in the confusion of my own whirling emotions as I tried to process the feelings of this new experience. I could do nothing but stand there, frozen. Long before anyone used words like self-care or somatic healing, science was already proving what the soul has always known. We cannot survive without touch. Human skin is wired for connection. Every gentle contact, holding, hugging, brushing a child's cheek, tells the nervous system, you are safe, you belong. One of the most striking demonstrations of this came from early hospital and orphanage observations. In the mid-20th century, doctors noticed that infants who were fed and kept warm but rarely held often failed to thrive. Many became sick or even died. It wasn't starvation of the body, it was starvation of the senses. Later research at the University of Miami's Touch Research Institute, led by psychologist Dr. Tiffany Field, confirmed the healing power of touch. Her studies showed that premature babies who received gentle daily massage gained weight faster, slept better, and were discharged from the hospital sooner than those who did not. Dr. Field's work helped shift how medicine viewed the human body, not as a machine that only needs food and medicine, but as an organism that also needs comfort, contact, and care. Touch regulates the human heartbeat, lowers stress hormones, and strengthens the immune system. It's as vital to life as breath and water. When we grow up without safe touch, or when the touch we receive is harmful, We learn to protect ourselves by closing off, by tightening the very muscles that were meant to soften in love. Healing that pattern begins the moment we allow healthy touch back in. A hug from a friend, a pat on the shoulder, a gentle hand offered in trust, a trusted massage. It reminds the body what the mind forgets, that connection is not a luxury, it's survival. And I'm going to take a sip of coffee while you think about this, and I will continue to share the closing comments from this chapter. A pause to explain neurodivergence from my new memoir, Sex, Drugs, and Rock and Roll. A message to the reader. If you've ever felt too much, too sensitive, or too complicated, it may not be that you are broken, only that you are wired differently. And difference, when embraced, becomes strength. I no longer see my marriage as a failure, my former marriage to Michael. It was the mirror that showed me my reflection, one that I had been too busy to see clearly. Michael and I were never meant to build a life together, but through our collision, I found the language of my own mind. Neurodivergence explained the mystery that had followed me for decades. It wasn't madness, it was meaning. It was the key that unlocked self-compassion and wiped away my years of self-loathing. For most of my life, touch meant tension. I braced for it instead of welcoming it. My body learned to armor itself long before my mind understood why. When I began studying healing and movement later in life, I discovered that touch, real, caring, intentional touch, wasn't something to fear. It was medicine. The research confirmed what my heart already sensed, that touch could quiet anxiety, lower blood pressure, even reawaken joy. Dr. Tiffany Field's studies on infants prove that human beings can literally fail to survive without physical affection. We are wired for connection from birth. Eventually, I needed to start over completely, so I moved east to York Harbor, Maine, where the sea air felt cleaner and the pace of life allowed me to breathe again. By day, I worked at the post office, sorting letters and packages, grounding myself in simple, rhythmic work. At night, I went to Down East School of Massage to become a licensed massage therapist. It felt like an unexpected calling, but also a natural extension of everything I was learning about the mind-body connection. And this is my chapter from my memoir about neurodivergence. Maybe you know somebody in your family. Maybe it's you that has been told you're too sensitive. You think differently. You think like a devil's advocate. Or are you an antagonist by nature, as if there's something wrong with the way you think? If that's you, then maybe this book will help you. Sex, Drugs, and Rock and Roll by Debra Cohen. That's me. Check out my books at debracohenbooks.org. And I'll be back right after this message. The memoir that bridges three worlds most people never see together. The underground new wave music scene, the raw reality of trauma and healing, and the unexpected, often miraculous spiritual encounters that shaped Debra Cohen into the woman she is becoming today. Check it out. Sex, Drugs, and Rock and Roll. Now available in online stores near you. And again, this is Debra Cohen. I thank you for listening. I hope that you found this chapter of my book on neurodivergence to be of help to you. And I wrote this memoir to let people know what a struggle it is to be different. Different is good, but when you're growing up and there's such a thing as peer pressure as a child, you want to have friends, and there are always some children that don't seem to have very many friends. Or worse yet, you get bullied like I did, not only by classmates, but some teachers as well, who think I'm being a difficult child, when all it is that I'm wired differently from you. And it's not a bad thing. It's up to grown-ups to understand why children are the way they are, to help them discover who they're meant to be, and to help them to blossom and grow, not to pick on them and tell them all these things that are wrong with them, which is what my mother did. So this book might help you too. I hope that you will enjoy it and talk about it and write a good book review, because that's how other people will find the book, and hopefully it will help them as well. Sex, Drugs, and Rock and Roll by Debra Cohen. And don't forget to check out my music, DebraCohenMusic.com. Thank you for listening. And if you missed the replay, you can find the archived podcast on my YouTube channel. The handle is at Jewish Rock Music. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope you have a wonderful week. Hope to see you again next week, 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time, on A Story and a Song.
What if I hear the voice tell me where I should go, even though it's not clear?